we're going to bring in an awesome guest, our very first local labor leader, as I like to say. Very often we try to figure out, very often we try to figure out exactly where did everything stem from. You know, was there a moment in time where we can realistically say that everything changed for labor in this country? And I always point to President Reagan firing the air traffic controllers in August of 1981, and not a single union walked out on the job the next day to ensure that there would be solidarity with obviously people in the labor movement. And because that was not done, the Democratic Party completely took it on the chin. The Republican Party increased their strength. And so instead of trying to revitalize union power in this country, the Democrats abandoned that and got in bed with Wall Street. And this was around 1985, 1986.
And that brings us to where we are now.
So we are on the downward slope. Florida, of course, is a horrific state for labor because it is a right to work state. It's also been GOP dominated for over 2 decades. And so we're trying to really build a labor resurgence here in South Florida. That is obviously our goal. And the first
also I'd like to say this is a nonpartisan thing.
Yes.
And that is something, and that is something that is very important. And I think that, and when we talk about any chance of any third party being able to be successful, if they do not incorporate labor from both the left and the right sides of the social spectrum, they're not going to be able to be efficient. You're not going to get enough people. There needs to be a labor party, and it doesn't need to matter what your opinion on abortion is. And that's where people need, if people came together on those issues, we'd be infinitely better off than fighting about things like trans people using bathrooms and, you know, all this nonsense.
But that is the whole essence of the way that this is done. It is done to distract and to not allow us to come together as an American people to fix this problem.
Yeah.
And we, I think, are slowly starting to get that. And I think with what's going on with the COVID relief bill, I think a lot of people are starting to catch on to that. Because as much as everyone wants to say, well, all the GOP voted against it, it doesn't matter, because you will always have enough Democrats to vote against it too, to make sure you don't get what you need. So with that said, we're going to try to figure out a way to make this circumstance better.
We're going to build this coalition of people that support labor.
We are.
That's basically what we need to be doing, and get all of those people on the same page. And yeah, I mean, so this was something that I thought about originally in terms of, and I'd still like to do this stuff about going out in the field and seeing what different people do, like almost like a, I don't know, career day kind of, you know, thing, but doing a series that we would do in the field labor. And we do have a new video production intern that is going to be, you know, helping me work on that. But so our very first labor guest, this is very cool, of course, because, you know, anybody who knows me knows I have a thing for the firemen. It's a thing. So this one's really a cool way for me to start, because I really can't, you know, something about those boys in the uniforms. So we're going to start with our local head of the IAFF. 4321 is the, yeah.
Yes.
Because I am definitely getting older. So Jason is someone who was very supportive when I was running. He definitely understands what is needed in terms of labor, and is very aware that a lot of those needs are not being met here. So we're going to bring him on. We're going to talk about that.
Yes, we are.
Hi.
Good evening.
How are you?
Very good. Thank you both for having me.
Absolutely.
How's everything going, sir?
We're busy. The state of Florida, like you said, keeps locals extremely engaged at every turn. And it's very interesting right now in Tallahassee.
Yeah, there definitely is not a shortage of interesting stories to talk about. And since you did bring up Tallahassee, you know, obviously a lot of people are focused on Governor DeSantis pushing this anti-protest bill. But what has been sort of the trajectory this first week from your perspective, as far as labor is concerned, from what you're seeing in Tallahassee?
Well, as you guys have hit on and spoke a little bit on, COVID has been a disastrous effect for many people. And the front line of nurses, the doctors, the police, and the fire and EMS, you know, you would think that the requirement on those groups to respond during the pandemic, they wouldn't come off extremely as aggressive as they have had on the on legislation. They've looked to create a dues deduction bill that would create issues for members to be a part of a union. They've created a bill to come after the retirement of the men and women that one day are going to go ahead and look to meet the age and time requirements. They're looking to completely close down their retirement. So those are just some of the small things that is currently happening out of the Senate, and it's been very difficult.
You know, it's funny when, not funny, but it's sort of pathetic. I listen to this and it's like, you guys are just always on the defense. You're always on the defense. It's like all they're doing in Tallahassee is coming up with harder and harder and stricter laws to sort of reinforce their right to work and just do things to sort of cut the, you at the knees. And you're not even able to do anything proactive. It's almost like you guys are just constantly on the defensive of this type of legislation to take away, when instead you should be able to be having, being on the offense and getting stuff that you need.
I would agree. Working together in collaboration is something that only a couple legislators sometimes even understand and are even willing to discuss. It's great when we have friends on both sides of the aisle, but just like you said, wasting time in a defensive posture just for benefits of men and women, whether it's a cancer benefit, whether it's a retirement opportunity, something to these little circumstances that have been ingrained for years, and then they come back to the table. We're never able to really work together and work on community paramedicine for the residents of Florida. So things that we could really knock out of the park. You're right. We sort of round robin and circle the wagons quite frequently.
Yeah, it's you guys don't ever even have an opportunity to just sort of take a step back and think about ways to make things better, because you're so busy constantly just trying to maintain anything that you have. It's really quite pathetic. That's just Florida. I mean, it's particularly bad here. Particularly
in your line of work, which requires the utmost protection. And I think that's something that I'm not sure a lot of people really understand what it means to be a firefighter or a paramedic, and the constant fear of, not having enough to, basically run the union as efficiently as possible. Can you talk about some of the effects that have, we'll say transpired? Obviously, we're constantly concerned about the effects of climate change, especially here in South Florida. Are there any ways that it directly affects your ability to do your job?
So it definitely increases call volume if the belief in climate change is identified and you were to Google it, you would start to see sea rises, and you would see the flood zones. And if you look and do studies in just the last, I think it's only happened once ever before, where we ran out of names for hurricanes where they had to go to the Greek alphabet, right?
Yeah.
So with the climate change and flooding, that's a real big one here in Florida. And a lot of cities, a lot of municipalities are talking about what they have to do for the coastline. And what that really transpires in our job is, do we have the right equipment readily accessible to go ahead and make rapid rescues if in the event surges and rise in that type of tide changes happen? Are we ready? And do we have the logistics and the personnel that can meet the needs of, if it becomes swift water or anything else that essentially can be caused by that? So I would say it's absolutely a concern, and we take it very serious as we're watching different changes happening. So we're really engaged with FEMA, NOAA, and all these organizations that really sort of feed us intel so we can prepare. But it all comes down to partnerships with our municipality leaders, our commissioners, our senators, our mayors, our governor. So we're ready for the residents.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's just a matter of when it's going to happen. At this point, I feel like our infrastructure in general is so woefully inadequate. I'm talking about more physical infrastructure, not people power. But like, to me, we could have what, years ago, a Category 1 hurricane that would come over us and we would be like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. But now, because of climate change, it sits on top for so long, flooding. And our infrastructure, our pipes, our sewage, all of those things are so not maintained and are in such a bad way. And to me, all of those things will make your life harder.
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting? I speak about the floods, but if you were to look back just within the last 18 months, maybe go back just a little further than that, the weather is changing so much, and the water also at times, as we've seen, has dried so quickly at different times that it's created the brush to be so dry that a lightning storm will go ahead and create acres upon acres of fires, and just that piece of the job as well. Residents losing their homes, being able to put strike teams together throughout the state. I mean, that's been amazing in itself as well. In the Everglades, it's definitely something that you're right. Having the right amount of personnel to put involved in these emergencies is also an issue of not having enough.
Right.
You know, that's a very good point, Jason. And I think when we think about, you know, what can we do to make your job easier?
Because, less cops, more firefighters.
Well,
people.
That's not what I was alluding to.
That's what I was thinking. As soon as you were talking about like, I'm thinking, defund the police.
That's a bad
increase
word.
The funding. I'm just saying, in my mind, I can see the money going from the blue to the red. You know, I'm just thinking. Just thinking out loud.
I was just wondering what your thoughts are as far as the infrastructure goes, because it seems that we're severely outdated when it comes to our energy grid. And how much of a difference would it make if we were to really transition to much more of an alternative or even green energy grid that focused on solar, wind, geothermal? I mean, listen, you know, we've even had a conversation about nuclear and whether or not that would be much more justifiable than anything related to especially fracking and, of course, coal and natural gas. So
when they mess with the Everglades.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Wow. So that goes real deep. So Turkey Point is one of the things I start thinking about when we think about energy, and I think about what it takes to be on the standby group for, you know, what it happens if that energy grid has an issue, and how many groups that will affect, and resources that have to be brought in to mitigate the emergency. So, you know, I think that's a real profound question that I would have to really look into a little further. As far as with the change of energy, I definitely would say this. In our career, we don't have one option that we can pull from. We have to have 3 or 4 options at any one time to pivot to. So I would say the same has to go with energy. You can't have just one focus point and all your eggs in one basket. Coming up on Easter, maybe that was a good little pun right there. But in general, having resources, and that may be other energies. Absolutely, I think it's very smart to think about and potentially be prepared for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, we're just backwards. But I mean, I know that in the Everglades, obviously, they do control burns. I know that there are definitely, they do purposeful. I've seen it before. But I have noticed in the past few years that we've had increasing amounts of fires that are not those. That are going on out there. And I know that is something that not only affects our air quality, but it obviously takes a lot of your manpower and people to be out there dealing with this. But that sort of leads me into the health issue, which is something that is exponentially affects people in your industry. And of course, you know, we're big supporters of single payer Medicare for all. But can you talk about how healthcare is handled, like, or how little you get and what the fight is for you guys to get the kind of coverage that you need?
Yeah, so that's always a very frustrating point, is the healthcare piece. You know, one of the desires on a national level that we're really trying to work on sort of fits right into that same position, which is, you know, the firefighters tend to be able to start a job early, around 20 years old, that they can get hired. And after, you know, the 25 years of service that they put in, they can leave at age 55 years old. So between 55 and 65 to receive any type of medical coverage, the cost is astronomical for those individuals. And that's even if they have decent health. And you figure by the time you do 25 years of service, you know, God forbid, if you don't have a cancer, or if you don't have some sort of a PTSD piece, or something that potentially puts you into a state that you're claim history is high, receiving some sort of favorable or fair cost for your medical is difficult. So we're hoping that we can get support on a national level to really work on that 10-year bracket of just someone that's given 25 years of service to be able to receive some sort of gap in that medical for all, almost that Medicaid, Medicare piece. I think it's a big concern, and I'll give you some examples. We were fortunate. Sometimes, I want to highlight the positives. The legislators got together with the cancer bill and found 21 cancers that if a firefighter receives while on the job, they're going to go ahead and hold the responsible party to the organization where they resided out of to follow through for that man or woman that caught one of those 21 cancers. Amazing, outstanding. The problem is now you have organizations that don't want to support a retiree that has just finished because they don't carry the organization's medical coverage. So now, too bad, too sad, they're not covered. They're on their own with lung cancer. It's sad. These are the type of woes. Even though there's good legislation, there's holes in the legislation.
Right.
Now, when you negotiate your annual budget, is that done directly with the local chapter, or is that all, does it go higher than that? And if so, how much of the budget has to be allocated towards healthcare? Because one of the key ingredients, and I think one of the easiest selling points of a universal system, is to not have to have it budgeted in with any union going forward. So how does it work exactly with you guys?
Okay, so great question. Our area for Broward County and the organization that I'm the labor leader over, we negotiate. Usually we are able to do about a 3-year contract at the max. Sometimes you'll have a 1-year depending, and if the right individuals can get to the table, you can usually get a 3-year contract. And what happens is during that piece, it's only for that entity. So each municipality and or county government, they will go ahead and negotiate their own contract with their respective organization. No different than myself. So that's the first part. The second part is healthcare is always a part of that. And it's funny you say that. There's 21 articles. We actually have just shy of, let's say, 48. The organization that I work for has chosen one of those articles, which is insurance. It's always the topic because insurance is always rising. And, when I got on the job, there were benefits because of the pay and because of the circumstances that you signed up for. One of the benefits would be some sort of insurance. Now, whether it would be free or you pay, it would still be there and the benefits. And the benefits over the years have absolutely changed, where at one time, there wasn't from one city that you may live in Broward County to the next, you may be out of network. So things have changed wildly since I've been a part of just the organization I have, just shy of 19 years now. And being on the board, here's some of the problems with healthcare. When it is managed by any entity, money is where everything's at, right? So if I have a lot of funding and a lot of people, I get to negotiate benefits, and I get to go ahead and do, studies, and companies get to come and tell me why they're the best. So what ends up happening at our level, we really don't get to pick the Blue Cross or Blue Shield or the Aetnas or maybe some of the premier organizations out there. We get to be told this is who the organization goes with. And so then we don't even get to negotiate benefits. What we usually negotiate is what the cost is going to be based upon putting to the member of the organization. That's what we really get to negotiate, and how much is going to be levied on them based upon how much the organization is going to pick up. And that's ultimately how much, even if, and sometimes the world gets this a little bit confused when they give a cost of living raise. If in the event they say, oh, well, they got a percentage raise of 2%, but if they raised your insurance where you're paying $200 or $300 that month, you really got nothing. You got no raise. But people don't see that,
Yeah. No, I mean, you guys are fighting for scraps. Like it's just, I find this so it's just, this is sad and it's pathetic. And this is time for a general strike to me. I mean, this is because this isn't across the board problem. I think different issues affect different unions and obviously different types of work areas have different, there's different technical things, but this is an across the board labor problem. The fact that you even have to be one of these 21 types of cancers that we cover, that's insane to me. It's like, you're sick, you get help. That's how that works. This is the fact that you have to have a list of what is acceptable cancers is just, people, this is unacceptable. This is just unacceptable.
Yeah. And I think it's a bigger problem when, we think about certain lines of work, and I can only imagine how difficult it is because unfortunately politics does end up playing a very big role. One thing I noticed that I always thought stood out the most, particularly when we had the 2016 Democratic primary between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, anytime the union allowed the rank and file to vote, they always voted for Bernie Sanders. Anytime the union only allowed the board to vote, they voted for Hillary Clinton. I'm curious, when it comes to dealing with pro-labor issues, how much of a stark difference is it between, let's say, union bosses versus union rank and file? Because I would imagine, just based on the experience that we had when Jen ran for Congress, that seemed to probably be as big a sticking point as any between whether a labor organization or even a movement, if you will, was willing to get behind her. Rank and file saw things one way, the people at the top saw it another way. And
they ghost us though.
So
we don't get to have contact with rank and file. We don't get to even make a case. We don't even get to present it. It's sort of like they're just steered in the direction of management, and management is.
So from your perspective, why do you see that happening? Because again, it could be any circumstance. I understand completely. Sometimes you have to play politics. Sometimes candidates are not viable, so there's no sense in putting political capital behind them. Totally understand that. But it does seem to me that one of the big problems in terms of really achieving some type of a labor movement is that there seems to be a lot of stagnation at the top. Can you speak on that, however which way you feel comfortable with addressing it?
Yeah, sure. So I would say this, the International Association of Firefighters, if you were to have been able to follow it here not too recently, we just had a brand new general president get elected. And that individual will be essentially been voted and will be the new president of the International Association of Firefighters for the first time in just shy of maybe 24 years. Wow. So when you think about that in itself, and then the general secretary treasurer is going to change as well. So what happens at the highest level, and as it comes down to the local levels, like even myself, right? What the union, is it fair to say bosses or officers, what ends up happening is the relationships with the political candidates, you get to engage more than essentially sometimes the rank and file. And what ends up happening, the rank and file, in whatever the respective discipline is, they're doing the job. They're the boots on the ground. They're the ground and pound, making sure that the 911 calls are answered, the people in the hospitals are getting seen, whatever the respective discipline is. But then you have the other voted for labor leaders that are engaging with the all of the facets of the mayors, the commissioners, the senators, and all of that type of level of people. And what ends up happening is sometimes throughout their career, as they're starting to come up, they end up doing firefighter, and I'll only speak on firefighter specific positive bills. They either put their name on a bill against their party, they stood up or stand next to for particular items that you were going for. And what ends up happening outside of building either a friendship and or trust, there ends up being a partnership. And so that's probably what you see at those levels sometimes, where the the administration that's essentially elected ends up having relationships, good or bad. I can understand where both sides sometimes wonder, how come we can't break that threshold, or what the other side is it's time for a change. How do we initiate it? Sometimes those relationships, it's hard to turn away and look at a friend that's been positive on your needs, but maybe on the global aspect has not met the need. So a lot of people are like, hey, why are you going that direction? So I hope that answers it, but that's what I see from my perspective.
And also I want to be clear that our issue, at least here locally, has not been with IAFF, has been with our AFL-CIO. So what we have, and I don't know if people understand how this works, that there's individual unions, and then they're all part of the AFL-CIO, or not all, but a lot of them are part of the AFL-CIO, which is just this additional layer of bureaucracy that stands between rank and file and their elected officials. It's just this one more layer of person that's political. And in Broward, that person is an impediment to progress. And that's just all there is to it. And so that is what I find the barrier, is not with you, but with that.
And I do think that the bigger issue lies with the fact that there have been many instances where, bosses will side with, dare I say, even anti-labor representatives. And that's when it becomes a very dicey situation. Could be something as simple as a representative who supports the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah.
Or, simply, has, the finances that they take in are from horrifically anti-labor, organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that ends up happening, then you're really caught between a rock and a hard place. But there is sort of this, hierarchy respect to those that are at the top, and not necessarily wanting, to start, a political fight, because it's already hard enough to deal with the fact that we are a right to work state, that, it's, as the Firefighters Union has said, it's not collective bargaining, it's collective begging. And when you have to do that on top of everything else, it does make this a lot more precarious. So I'm curious as to what we can do, whether through GenCorps or just locally, what can we be doing to really help build the labor movement in South Florida in conjunction with what you guys do?
Oh, wow. So I would say this. One of the things that comes to my mind is, right now, the biggest thing for any Florida, for any county or municipality that's a part of the FRS in our state of Florida, one of the big things right now is we are truly fighting for our life to save our retirement, period. That's number one. The legislators out of the Senate, out of Estero, that senator has come after retirement, and that would be number one. That's number one. And if
that's on the table right now, that's what they're pushing right now.
That's right now.
So we're going to need people to be contacting their legislators.
This is GOP State Senator Estero is his name?
Out of Estero, Mr. Rodriguez.
Out of Estero.
Out of Estero, Florida. Yeah.
So yeah. Who goes after the firefighters? Isn't that like? It's such poor form. There's no way for that to ever look good on him. Like, I don't understand who supports that.
Somebody with a lot of money who wants to see the pension fund. This is like a Gordon Gekko Wall Street situation. This is basically, you've got an overcrowded pension fund and they want the money, and that's it. This is greed. This is full blown greed.
I'm disgusted.
And they know that money is there, and they know that if they get the right bill passed through Tallahassee, they'll get the money, and that's it.
Right.
Right.
And we're fighting for our families and the workers. Honestly, I couldn't be more sincere when I say we're in a full-fledged fight to just maintain. And if you were to say, what are you maintaining? We're just trying to maintain that firefighters don't have to be 63 years old doing this job. I mean, the job is a young person job, and after 25 years of being 55, I mean, I know neither one of you are 55, and could you imagine from
not that
being
far.
55. You're not there. You're
Not
not there.
that far.
But I mean, think about going to, you name
Yeah.
it, Hollandale Beach. Choose Hollandale Beach, a high rise,
Yeah.
and a 50, 60-year-old male or woman has to go and climb those stairs and recover people, bring them. It's
Oh,
not
With
Oh.
with 75 pounds of gear, mind
Just-
you, on their
75
back.
plus, correct?
Yeah.
No, it's meant for young people, and it's our job to then take care of those people that do that, you know, after the
I
fact.
mean, I have a very good friend.
It's like, you know, it's service.
Now, I have a very good friend who's now a firefighter up in Jupiter, and he loves the job, and he's just a few years younger than me, but he's not going to want to be doing this. Again, the job is really meant, you know, in a way.
There's parts of that job, I'm sure, administrative parts of that job that are suitable for older people.
But the physical,
it's a funnel.
Yes, the
It's a
physical
funnel.
wear and tear of being a fireman,
Yeah.
it's a 25 to 30-year job. And if you're doing it past that point, if you're not in an administrative role, it's beyond taxing. And I work out and I take care of myself, and I can't imagine the difficulty, even when you're young, carrying around 75 pounds of gear on top of potentially having to carry somebody. You might have to carry somebody who's 200 pounds.
Oh,
absolutely.
And the odds of that are going up with obesity. Trust me. I mean,
so the firemen carry with all the gear on.
Even.
It's not easy, and then you have the wear and tear and all that stuff. And the idea that they want to come after this pension fund is just, again, it's the lowest form of human greed, because they are not anyone who's ever done physical labor in their life.
I just want to say, John, can you put up the link to the Florida legislature so that people, to the directory, so that we can have the link, people can click on it or whatever. And we just need people to be talking to their legislators and, you know, flooding their phone lines and emailing them, because this is really not okay.
And to do a quick check-in, as we like to do, because I've got the radio charm, if you will. We are speaking with Jason Smith, who is the president of the IAFF. That is the International Firefighters Union. And of course, it is the local chapter 4321 here in Broward County. We do have a question. I don't know how much you necessarily, I mean, obviously Tallahassee takes precedence. I don't know how much you pay attention to DC politics, but obviously there is the PRO Act that is on the table right now. It seems to have some, you know, pretty good positives as it relates to labor. I don't know if you've dived into it too much, but would obviously like to get your feedback if that is something that you've taken a look at.
Yeah, I've gotten a brief on it from our international district president, and from what I understand, is this the bill that provides the protection? So for those forming or the labor movement,
form a union without being union busted, so to speak.
Correct. It's huge. It's a huge one for us, and I'll tell you what. And if I understand right, if it would pass, it would help out every state in the union. I mean, if you really think about it, you have Carolinas right now that can't literally talk to their employer about healthcare issues for their men and women. In Carolinas right now, they can't. At least I'm able to broker that conversation through collective bargaining, but they can't even do that in Carolina. I mean, that is a huge positive, and it is not, and it protects that union busting piece, which, here's what's funny. At the state level, currently right now, they are having a dues deduction bill that they're coming off of and coming after. And what would happen is it's a form of trying to shut down organized labor. And what the current bill and I know this was asked about in reference on the national level, but at the local level, the state of Florida, there's something very close where they're actually coming after trying to shut down dues deductions, which is very interesting, where this is looking to protect the union worker.
This is one of the reasons why, obviously when it comes to labor, the Democratic side is obviously better than the GOP side. But when it comes to corporate special interest money in politics, which is still the number one obstacle that we have to deal with on both sides of the aisle, the significance of something as simple as the $15 minimum wage at the federal level would supersede any of the screwery we are monetized. We have to be careful of our language on the show. But the effery, if you will, that is going on with somebody like State Senator Jeff Brandes out in St. Petersburg, who's basically trying to put every single regulation, amazing the GOP wants to regulate, of anyone who would be able to achieve the $15 minimum wage. If we had a federal law, federal mandate of the $15 minimum wage, then it wouldn't matter what they're doing here at the state level. They would have to adhere to the federal law. And so the same is true here with the PRO Act. Because this is a union-busting, anti-worker, anti-labor state.
How is that not a 10th Amendment issue?
You're the lawyer. She's the lawyer.
It just seems like there's a potential 10th Amendment problem here. I mean, again, I am completely opposed to right to work laws, but I don't know. They will argue that there's a 10th Amendment problem with them doing that because states like Florida will not like that at all. And
Florida, in many ways, is ground zero for a real populist, labor uprising. Yeah. The state is built on
general strike.
It's hospitality and service. That is this state in a nutshell. And the fact that the labor laws are so horrifically bad. I mean, look, GOP domination for over 2 decades. That's, and especially the GOP in this state, because I come from New Jersey. I've lived in New York. The GOP is rough in a lot of parts of the country, but in Florida, they are so rabidly anti-labor.
Yeah.
It is just, it's unbelievable.
There's not it's not populist here. No, it's just not.
Really, really not. But we are trying to change that narrative. And I do think something like the PRO Act would supersede a lot of the difficulties that you do have to deal with on the regular in Tallahassee.
Yes, I would agree with you. This would be a definitely line in the sand at a national level, letting these local, state leaders recognize, hey, there's somebody looking out for the labor. Yeah. And that's really important.
Yeah.
I do think, we've done a great job and we've covered a lot of topics here without having to dive into really the political side of things. But I am curious from your perspective, what do you think locals or even the rank and file can do going forward to get behind candidates or even representatives who are champions of labor without having to worry about the people at the tippy top playing big party politics and superseding the needs of the rank and file? What do you think could be done going forward to try to alleviate some of those pressures?
So I'm glad you asked that, and I had no clue you were going to ask that question like that. And here's what I will tell you. Here's honestly a conversation I had just recently with a state representative and the firefighters, Florida professional firefighter side. It is firefighters, and I speak from my point of view, firefighter needs is the individual that's going to be going from here forward, whether we send them to Tallahassee or whether we send them to Washington. What are their views, and are they firefighter views? And the big picture of everything else, we don't get in the same lane of the cops. We can't get in the same lane as the teachers. They're all important to our society, but I can only focus for the men and women that I represent, firefighter pieces. And if that individual meets that need for the firefighters, then I think what you're going to see is we're going to absolutely grab them and push them forward, because sometimes promises are nice, and actions are better than promises. And I think we've seen that. We're recognizing that at our state level, and it hurts. It hurts when you put people in places and in trust versus for the promise versus seeing the actions ahead of time. So there's a lot of young legislators that are looking to represent the residents of their respected areas, whether it's going to be on a local level or on a national level. And I would say that if they are going to align with the firefighter needs, I think that they found friends.
That's great to hear. let's have a little fun. Obviously, it's a little difficult with COVID right now, but what's sort of the wins and losses when it comes to the police versus the firefighters? You do like a softball game, a basketball game. How does it usually? Do you guys just have
firefighters are so much cooler?
Well, that's again.
So much cooler.
We're not here to diss our boys in blue, but we obviously. We know we have issues with law enforcement and there are things that need to change. But with that said, how does that unfold? Do you guys have like an annual picnic? What's the deal?
So prior to COVID, there would be all type of neat programs we had put together, and one that was put together not too long before COVID was a shooting opportunity, and we weren't invited back because the firefighters actually beat the cops in the shooting.
I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised at all. I'm just not.
That gives new meaning to we'll give anybody a badge and a gun if they sign.
Yes.
It's completely the training is so completely woefully different in just general that that doesn't surprise me at all. No.
Yes. No. There has been tournaments, like you said, softball. There has. There's been basketball games in the past. They've done hockey. And luckily for the fire,
that was my cousin did the hockey. He's all about hockey down in Miami. He is definitely. If there's anybody who's doing, he's with Miami-Dade, but yes, and all about, and we talked about that when I met with their union down there, because one of the guys there actually played hockey with.
I just happen to, I happen to come from Jersey and especially cities like New York and Chicago. The police versus firefighters like get-togethers are fierce. They are very fierce. It is a real rivalry, and there's no question that. Listen, it's friendly competition, but the police really don't like it when the firefighters beat them.
No, God, no. So we call it hose versus the cuffs. So that's usually how it goes. So it's really neat, and it's always great to rub it in their face that number one, they were in the wrong line for employment, and number two, we just beat them. It's always good.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real thing, even at the local level, even in the county level. So we're all here to have a little bit of fun. Obviously, we are extremely grateful that you came on tonight. Any final thoughts that you want to share? Obviously, we think the world of what you do, and obviously the fact that you've been very forthcoming about the need for change down here, and the kind words you've shared about Jen obviously means a lot. But we obviously want to do what we can on your end. You gave us some information. We're going to look into this bill. Senator Rodriguez from Estero.
We're going to be encouraging everybody to be contacting legislators.
Yeah, we can definitely turn this into something for sure. And no one. If you basically the headline just basically becomes they're trying to take the firefighters' pension away. I don't think there's anybody who's going to be too enthusiastic.
That's what I'm saying. It's a really bad look. Like I don't know how that just can't look good.
No, but then I think it gets back to the bigger picture, which is we end up in this bubble of thinking that everyone is paying attention to politics.
Well, that's the problem.
Very small portion of people actually know what's going on.
They slide things through and people don't even realize it. That's why, and that's what we need to do. That's our job.
That is our job. Our job is to make people aware, because as I'm sure you've encountered, most people, they're like, I had no idea they were trying to cut the firefighters'
so let people
pension.
Start calling their legislators. Let them be answering their phones.
Yes. And this is a very clear-cut issue, because everybody of every political stripe likes their firefighters.
Yeah.
Period. So this is not a gray area. No. And it's not. And again, if Jason, one last thing I think we should touch upon, because I don't think enough people really understand that your union also includes paramedics and the importance of that particular profession that never gets talked about enough. Yeah. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So the paramedics, and we do have some single certified that are currently on the job. Our system years ago transitioned from a 3-tier system. So you would have a private medical group show up. You would have your county EMS, paramedic, EMTs, and then your county fire. So when we merged in the 90s, now it's considered fire rescue. But, we're one of the last that actually in Broward that actually has single certifieds. So those paramedics jobs are at equal to the fire group that's going on. So their certification does not allow them to ride on a fire truck, but it's on the ambulance, on what we call the rescue truck. And, these are some of the most advanced, aggressive. These are the individuals that are field training officers.
Yeah.
They actually will go ahead, and when you're in dire need, this is their niche. We've recognized that. We've not put them in a corner. We've not asked them or hurt them to retire through transition, through change. We recognize their skill as well as being cross-trained, but they really go to the next level. And let me tell you, IVs, dealing with individuals with PTSD in the back of these rescues, and all of a sudden they go ahead and their mental incapacity at that moment changes, and we have to give them different type of medicines to not only protect ourselves but protect them and or their family, depending on the environment. It's an amazing job that our single certifieds as well as our cross-trained have to do. But as a paramedic, they are seeing the worst of the worst on a daily basis. Think about all calls, and that's what they're seeing and they're responding to. The kids, the elders, the vehicle accidents, the overdoses, you name it, they're right there.
And considering we are the opioid capital of the United States down here in South Florida, I can only imagine how you got to have
shortage of ODs.
Yeah, you definitely got to have very thick skin to be a paramedic. No question about it.
Yeah,
special group.
It is. It is a very special group. And obviously so are the firefighters. And again, we're speaking with Jason Smith, who's the president of the IAFF Local 4321. Very easy one to remember.
Yeah.
So we will love to have you back in the near future. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to do on your behalf. We're going to look into this horrific anti-union bill by Senator Rodriguez, who's attempting to take the firefighters' pension away.
Yeah.
Not cool. So we will be looking into that. And obviously, we're going to be seeing you down the road. And we can't thank you enough for coming on the show this evening.
Thank you both. We appreciate it as a local, and just understand for you both as well as all your listeners, we are supportive. We are for you. You need us. You call. Our number's easy. 911 will be there.
On that note, I can't think of a better way to end the
Jason.
segment.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
You do the same, sir. Take care, buddy.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.